Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Firewalls Don't Stop Dragons. I'm your host, Kerry Parker. Today we have episode 469 for February 23rd, 2026. Got a big news show for you today. Before we get into the rundown for the stories today, I want to tell you a couple things real quick. First of all, it is tax time again. That means that the tax fraud and tax scams are going to be coming out of the woodwork if they haven't already. So be very careful looking at through email that has anything to do with tax stuff. And I will remind you again, if you have not already done so, you should claim your account at irs.gov. And yes, that means you have to go through, I think it's login.gov or id.me something. You'll have to do some identity proof stuff, but the government has that information anyway. And anyway, so you'll need to do that. You need to plant your flag there so that someone else doesn't claim that account on your behalf. And then while you're at it, I would go ahead and set up your IRS IP PIN. That's a per year PIN code for filing your taxes. It's kind of like 2FA for your tax return. Anybody who files a return on your behalf would need that PIN code, including your tax preparer. So make sure they have that information as well. It changes every year. It's a little hard to find, but it's worth setting those things up. Also, I wanted to mention, 2 shows ago, I talked about leaving comments in the Federal Register, and I kept looking for it. And honestly, it was really hard to find and search for it, but I did finally discover that I got the dates wrong. I mean, I had the date right. February 9th was the date, but it wasn't the start date. It was the stop date. So by the time you heard that, and by the time I put that podcast out, the comment period was already over. So I haven't heard anything more about that plan to require ridiculous amounts of information, but I will keep you posted when I do. All right, so we've got a new show for you today. Lots of stuff to talk about. A lot of similar stories involving ID checks and age verification and facial recognition. So first of all, we're going to talk about a massive data breach in Australia of driver's licenses of over 200,000 drivers. Then we're going to talk about a bug at a student admissions website that exposed children's personal information. Then, of course, we have to talk about the Discord fiasco of them requiring face scans or ID verification next month. There's a lot of nuances to that and a lot of follow-ups on that. There was also an article that briefly talked about all the various countries that are moving to ban social media for minors. I wanted to give you an update on what that stands and do a little commentary about that. Then we're going to talk about how Reddit, Meta, and Google have voluntarily been giving up information to the Department of Homeland Security, info about anti-ICE users. And then Meta was recently caught trying to slip in facial recognition when they thought we would be distracted. There was an article saying that password managers were insecure that you may have seen that I think was hyperbolic and more than a little bit confusing. So I want to talk about that. DJI's robovac called Romo had a horrible security problem that allowed basically anybody to log into anybody else's robot, including seeing through the robot's eyes, because these robots have cameras and I think microphones as well. And then we also need to talk about Ring, which was the video doorbell company bought up by Amazon. They had a rather creepy commercial during the Super Bowl that has led to all sorts of other stories, including their relationship with Flock, the ALPR mass surveillance company. WhatsApp and Telegram have been blocked in Russia, and Meta has been branded an extremist organization. And while I don't believe I have a whole lot of Russian listeners, though if I do, I would love to hear from you. This is really something that we all need to be paying attention to because it can happen anywhere. And Europe is making an effort to ditch US big tech for more private alternatives. And that will segue very well into my tip of the week, where we're going to talk about a new de-Googling article that I added to my long list of articles because there's been some new developments there, and I want to make you aware of them. All right, so lots to talk about. Let's get to the news. All right, first up, this is from drive.com, which I was not aware of, but it's an Australian website talking about a pretty nasty data breach. Unauthorized access to data of hundreds of thousands of Australians has taken place in a security breach that occurred last week. Sydney-based financial tech firm UX, that's like U-Y-O-U and then the letter X, was the subject of a hack that captured data tied to Australians around the country. The hacker claims to have stolen the information of 444,000 lenders with details including government ID information, phone numbers, email addresses, and residential addresses. A further 229,000 driver's license numbers were captured, with the data coming from almost 800 broker organizations that rely on the UX platform. The hacker released the following statement, quote, "Among other things, we were able to exfiltrate the personal and financial data of 444,538 unique borrowers, income, debts, government IDs, home addresses, because they trusted their finance brokers, and those brokers made the critical error of trusting UX," unquote. The full scope of the cyber attacks is yet to be revealed. Since the data breach, UX has added additional monitoring and security measures across its systems, and the statement from UX said that it had, quote, "identified unauthorized access to its systems by a third party. We are now aware that a threat actor has released data that it claims to have obtained as part of its unauthorized access. As a result, we have identified that personal information may have been compromised. In accordance with our legal obligations, we have kept the Office of the Australian Information Commissioner informed throughout this matter. Now that the incident has evolved, we will continue lodging the appropriate regulatory notification. We will also be commencing the appropriate regulatory notifications to affected individuals whose information may have been compromised," unquote. Anyone who believes they may have been affected is urged to contact financial institutions and lenders they have dealt with to confirm if they use UX services and take steps to change account passwords and identifying information. A new driver's license card number can be issued in all states and territories as a security measure. All right, so obviously this is yet another data breach, and they're happening all the time, and I can't cover them all. But the reason I talked about this one in particular is I wanted to talk about the storing of identification. We really need to institute new ways to verify things besides uploading and storing images of our government-issued IDs. That seems to be the go-to for all of these sites, and it just keeps biting us in the butt. Security is hard, but a lot of these companies, I don't even think are trying. Regardless, whenever you store this much juicy information, people are going to come looking for it. As we were saying last week with Sean Zadig from Yahoo, we really need to be treating this information like toxic waste. Collect as little as possible, keep it for no longer than is absolutely necessary, and secure it. But short of that, I think we need to start thinking about doing things differently. We don't really need to be storing copies of people's IDs. We have ways of doing this. There are cryptographic techniques. You can do attestations using tokens and things, kind of like Apple Pay does now with credit cards. When you pay for something with Apple Pay, they don't get your credit card. They get a token that represents your credit card. So the merchant doesn't ever see your credit card number. We can be doing similar things. There are some interesting techniques and ways to do this that would allow us to not store the actual IDs, photo IDs of people so that they could be stolen. We need to be smarter about this. All right, next up, this is from TechCrunch. A student admissions website used by families to enroll children into schools has fixed a security lapse that was exposing their personal information. The website, Ravenna Hub, that's Ravenna, Ravenna Hub, which lets parents apply and track the status of their kids' applications across thousands of schools, was allowing any logged-in user to access the personally identifiable data associated with any other user, including their children. The exposed data includes children's names, dates of birth, addresses, pictures, and details about their school. Email addresses and phone numbers of parents, as well as information about the children's siblings, were also exposed. Florida-based Venture Ed Solutions, which develops and maintains Ravenna Hub, says on Ravenna Hub's website that it serves over 1 million students and processes hundreds of thousands of applications a year. TechCrunch first learned of the vulnerability on Wednesday and soon after alerted the company. Venture Ed fixed the bug the same day, but TechCrunch held this report until we could verify that the bug was fixed. Nick Laird, the chief executive of Venture Ed Solutions, told TechCrunch in an email that the company was able to replicate the issue and has addressed the vulnerability. Laird said the company was investigating the incident, but he would not commit to notifying users about the security lapse or say, when asked by TechCrunch, if the company has the ability to check if there was any improper access to the other user's data. We also asked if Ravenna Hub had its security checked by a third party, and if so, by whom. Laird would not say and declined to comment further. The vulnerability is known as an Insecure Direct Object Reference, or IDOR. a common security flaw that allows users to access stored information because of a weak or non-existent security controls on the concerned servers. In practice, the bug allowed any logged-in user to access another student's data, including their personal information, by modifying the unique number associated with a student's profile using their web browser's address bar. In the case of Ravenna Hub, student numbers are sequential, meaning it was possible for any user to access another student's data by changing the profile number by one or more digits. When TechCrunch created a new account with test data, we found that the web address contained a 7-digit number. As such, there were slightly more than 1.63 million records prior to ours that were accessible to any other user. This is the latest security lapse involving simple security flaws affecting the personal information of children. In January, online mentoring site Ustrive exposed the personal information of its users, many of whom are still in school. Okay, so when I've dabbled around in security testing, this is one of the first things you learn when you're looking at a web application. If you could log into an account and you see somewhere in the URL of that site, once you've logged in, if there's a number in there or some sort of thing that looks kind of like a random identifier, the first thing you do is you try changing that to some other identifier. And sadly, what you'll find out, like we did in this case, that allows you to access somebody else's data. So in other words, there's a login form that you go to that gets you into the site. But once you're into the site, it doesn't keep you contained to just your data. You've passed the authentication step, and now you can access anything. So these guys created their own account, which you could probably do without needing any sort of approval to do so, saw that their account had a number in it. That number appeared to be sequential, like they just gave it the next number in the sequence. So they could just go to the address bar in the URL where it's, my cool site / my ID number / whatever, and then change that ID number to some other number less than theirs, because if it's sequential, it would have to be something prior to you, and you would get to see someone else's data. And if you did all of them, you would theoretically be able to get everybody's data. This is one of the first tricks you try when you're doing a web-based capture the flag tournament, or a CTF. The IDOR is one of the simplest and most straightforward ways to dig around in a website for websites that don't have security practices that prevent that. There are hacker tools like Burp Suite that just have this built in. You tell it what parameters you want to tweak, and it just tries them all and tells you what it finds. So we need to do better. These kinds of things should not be in the wild. On the flip side, we need to be very careful with who we trust our information to. And we also need some consequences for these sorts of egregious failures in security. Moving on, let's talk about Discord. All right, so for those of you who don't know, Discord started out, I believe, as mostly a gaming platform for people to talk to each other and literally voice chat, and also text chat. And then after the fact, after you're done gaming, you can talk some more. It's a forum kind of a thing, but it's really powerful. It's grown a lot over the years. And a friend of mine got me into it. We don't use it for gaming at all. It's kind of like, it's if you've never used it, it's kind of hard to describe. It's a chat room, but it's got multiple channels, and those channels can be organized and sorted in any way. You could set up different permissions and roles for everybody on the forum so that certain people have privileged access and some don't. It's got a lot of fun features in terms of emojis and GIFs and things. It's kind of like every other messaging channel you've been in, but now it's a whole suite of channels all related under one umbrella for a purpose, and that's called a server. And in that server, there can be multiple channels, and they also do voice and video. I don't use it for that, but it's a popular use as well. I use it for my patrons. It's automatically hooked up with Patron to manage users and user privileges, which is very convenient for me, and it's got a lot of great features. One of them, unfortunately, is not end-to-end encryption, which is, in their defense, kind of hard to do, especially for group chats like this. But it's not impossible. I really wish they would do it, and maybe we'll get there. But anyway, the big thing is Discord has decided to kind of pre-comply with a lot of age verification laws. And it's a global company, so I'm sure that already they need to be enforcing this in some places. But now they're basically rolling it out everywhere, even before it's required. And this has caused a lot of backlash, even though it really doesn't apply to very many Discord users, at least not yet. So there's a lot to talk about here. Let me start with this original article from The Verge that talked about this announcement and the backlash, and then I'll get into some of the subsequent stuff. All right, so first, from The Verge. Discord announced on Monday that it's rolling out age verification on its platform globally starting next month, when it will automatically set all users' accounts to a teen-appropriate experience unless they demonstrate that they're adults. This is a quote from someone named Savannah Badalich or Badalish, Badalich. I'm not sure how to pronounce that. I'll just call her Savannah. And Savannah says, quote, "For most adults, age verification won't be required, as Discord's age inference model uses account information such as account tenure, device and activity data, and aggregated high-level patterns across Discord communities. Discord does not use private messages or any message content in this process," unquote. Users who aren't verified as adults will not be able to access age-restricted servers and channels, won't be able to speak in Discord's live stream stage channels, and will see content filters for any content Discord detects as graphic or sensitive. They will also get warning prompts for friend requests from potentially unfamiliar users, and DMs from unfamiliar users will be automatically filtered into a separate inbox. Direct messages in servers that are not age-restricted will continue to function normally, but users won't be able to send messages or view content in an age-restricted server until they complete the age check process, even if it's a server they were part of before age verification rolled out. Savannah says those servers will be obfuscated with a black screen until the user verifies they're an adult. Users also won't be able to join any new age-restricted servers without verifying their age. Discord's global age verification launch is part of a wave of similar moves at other online platforms, driven by an international legal push for age checks and stronger child safety measures. This is not the first time Discord has implemented some form of age verification either. It initially rolled out age checks for users in the UK and Australia last year, which some users figured out how to circumvent using Death Stranding's photo mode. All right. Stop for a second. Death Stranding is a video game. In the video game, apparently there's some way for you to live control a generated human face. And so kids who were underage were using this video game thing to generate a moving face that looked like an adult to fool this face scanning age checking thing from Discord. So anyway, Savannah says Discord, quote, "immediately fixed it after a week," unquote, but expects users will continue finding creative ways to try getting around the age checks, adding that Discord will, quote, "try to bug bash as many as we possibly can," unquote. In other words, fix. It's not just teens trying to cheat the system who might attempt to dodge age checks. Adult users could avoid verifying as well due to concerns about data privacy, particularly if they don't want to use an ID to verify their age. In October, one of Discord's former third-party vendors suffered a data breach that exposed users' age verification data, including images of government IDs. Pretty sure I talked about that back when that happened. If Discord's age inference model can't determine a user's age, a government ID will still be required for age verification in its global rollout. According to Discord, to remove the new teen by default changes and limitations, quote, "users can choose to use facial age estimation or submit a form of identification to Discord's vendor partners, with more options coming in the future," unquote. The first option uses AI to analyze a user's video selfie, which Discord says never leaves the user's device. Okay, that's good. If the age group estimate, teen or adult, from the selfie is incorrect, users can appeal it or verify with a photo of an identity document instead. That document will be verified by a third-party vendor, but Discord says the images of those documents, quote, "are deleted quickly, in most cases immediately after age confirmation," unquote. Okay, what's quickly mean and what does most mean? Anyway, finally, this representative from Discord says, after the October data breach, Discord immediately stopped doing any sort of age verification flows from that vendor and is now using a different third-party vendor. She adds, quote, "we're not doing biometric scanning or facial recognition. We're doing facial estimation. The ID is immediately deleted. We do not keep any information around like your name, the city that you live in, if you used a birth certificate or something else, any of that information," unquote. Okay, there's a lot to talk about here, and there's been a lot of follow-up articles around this. The main one being Discord, was trying to clarify, look, almost nobody's going to be affected by this. You have to be in a channel or a server on Discord that is 18 and up, adult. So unless someone who owns the server, and I don't know if you could do this by per channel basis, but if the room you're in has been designated as this is for adults only, That is when this would trigger if you have not already verified your age or if Discord hasn't already inferred your age to be an adult. So for instance, I'm in several Discord servers, some of which I own, some of which I co-own, and others which I don't. I don't think any of them, and there's probably, at least a dozen, maybe a couple dozen that I'm in, and I may not be affected by this at all. I don't know that any of these servers require me to be an adult. Now, I'll find out soon if that's the case. But my Patron one, for example, definitely is not that way. My Patron server is not adult only, and I will never make it so. So under these rules anyway, my patrons would never be subject to an ID check. So also realize that Discord is being forced to do this by law. They're already doing this in some places because the local jurisdiction requires them to do so, but they are essentially pre-complying with other places that are threatening to do this, and still others that haven't even talked about doing this yet. They're making this a global thing. Now, this may be somehow related to their IPO. They're looking to go public this summer, I think. Maybe they're trying to get their ducks in a row and look like they're make them more palatable to investors. I don't know. But like all of these age verification systems that are popping up everywhere now due to these various age gating laws, first of all, they don't really work very well. There's a lot of different ways people are finding to get around these age verification systems. Second, if they do have to collect government ID, as we've already seen, that is a very dangerous thing to do, and those government IDs contain a lot more information than is strictly necessary, and then that makes whoever's holding that data a target for someone to try to exfiltrate all that information. So, again, I understand why they're trying to do this. I know that we want to keep harmful content away from minors, but there's a lot of problems with trying to implement this, not the least of which is security and privacy. There are a lot of cases where young people under 18, need access to things that others would consider to be adult content or adult in nature. Things like sex education, and a lot of times LGBTQ communities are ruled as adult-only content. We cannot age gate that kind of stuff. And then just think about other things, like just simple things. What if you are on a Discord server about art appreciation? A lot of classical art has a lot of nudity in it. And it's frankly puritanical to say that kids can't see that stuff. But this is also just going to have a lot of horrible effects on marginalized communities and at-risk communities of minors. And then on the flip side, it's not just going to affect minors. All of us are going to have to prove our age. And in a lot of cases, that really means prove our identity, which means no more anonymity. Now, as I was getting ready to record this, somebody tagged me on social media, thank you, about a related article saying that in the UK, Discord is experimenting with another company. They've been claiming they're going to use this company called K-ID, which is cleverly also KID, that is being used for age verification, which I believe their services work strictly on device. None of this information ever would leave your device. That's the way to do this. But they are experimenting with this other company in the UK called Persona, which has a very different mission and has government contracts, including with the US government. And they do their processing in the cloud, not on the device. So once again, it's a slippery slope. We have to be very careful. And I'll just, as a blanket reminder, you're not just trusting the company that you're dealing with directly. You're almost always also dealing with their partners and therefore having to trust their partners. And their partner list can change quickly and often without any sort of meaningful notice. And the privacy policies themselves can change daily. So the only solution here is just to not do these things. And we also, of course, need regulations. All right, I better move on. So real quick, TechCrunch had an article about all the countries that are looking to ban social media. So I just want to run through this real quick just to kind of keep everybody up to date. And it says, over the past few months, several countries have announced plans to restrict social media access for children and teens. Australia became the first to implement such measures at the end of last year, setting a precedent that other countries are now closely watching. Australia's regulations, along with other countries' proposals, aim to reduce the pressures and risks that young users may face on social media, including cyberbullying, addiction, mental health issues, and exposure to predators. Of course, there are concerns about privacy regarding invasive age verification and excessive government intervention. Critics, including Amnesty Tech, have said such bans are ineffective and that they ignore the realities of younger generations. Despite this, many nations are moving ahead with proposed legislation. So, quick list. Australia became the world's largest. We know about that. They banned Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, Threads, TikTok, X, YouTube, Reddit, Twitch, and Kick, though it doesn't include WhatsApp or YouTube Kids. Interesting. Denmark is set to ban social media platforms for children under 15. The Danish government announced in November 2025 that it had secured support for the ban from 3 governing coalition parties and 2 opposition parties in parliament. The government's plans could become law as soon as mid-2026. Also, in late January, French lawmakers passed a bill that would ban social media for kids under 15. President Emmanuel Macron has supported the measure as a way to protect children from excessive screen time. The bill still has to get through the country's Senate before a final vote in the lower house. In early February, German Chancellor Friedrich Merz's conservatives discussed a proposal to bar children under 16 from using social media. However, there were signs that his center-left coalition partners were hesitant to support an outright ban. Greece is said to be close to announcing a social media ban for children under 15. In early February, the Malaysian government said in November 2025 that it plans to ban social media for children under 16, and it plans to implement it this year. Slovenia is drafting legislation to prohibit children under 15 from accessing social media. Spain's prime minister announced in early February that the country has plans to ban social media for children under the age of 16. The ban still needs parliamentary approval, and the UK is weighing a ban on social media for children under 16 as well. The government says it will consult parents, young people, and civil society for their views to determine whether a ban would be effective. Okay, so that's just a quick rundown. Of course, there's several states in the United States that are doing this as well. Let me bring up yet another issue around this, and that is that many people are saying that it's obvious that social media is bad for kids. But honestly, the science really is not settled. I've seen stuff go both ways on this. And also, correlation is different than causation. Social media can also give kids a supportive community. It's not all bad. And I would argue that it's the way we're doing social media that's the problem. The real issue for kids as well as adults is the rise of purely algorithmic feeds. This is no longer signing up to follow people that we know and only seeing what those people post in chronological order. Now, because these sites are ad-based and they need to make as much revenue as possible, they try to maximize engagement, which now means that much of what we see is chosen by them, not us. And the algorithms are designed to keep us engaged. And unfortunately, a lot of that sort of thing tends to be harmful, mentally harmful. So I would argue it's not social media that's the problem, it's the algorithms. And related to all of this is we're talking about repealing Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act, which I think was 1996. Section 230 is very short. I'm going to read it to you. It's called The 26 Words That Made the Internet. And it says, no provider or user of an interactive computer service shall be treated as the publisher or speaker of any information provided by any other information content provider. All right, so basically what that means is if I'm just a dumb platform and people sign up for accounts with me so they can post stuff on social media, I'm not responsible for what they post, given, within some reason. I think they still expect you to take down threats and things like that. And this is often compared to, AT&T not being responsible for the phone calls that are held on its service. They can't control everybody's phone calls. Or if they could, we certainly wouldn't want them to. And I think that has value. But we now have celebrities campaigning to repeal Section 230. And I think a lot of what they're doing is misguided. It's got to be maintained. We just need to change how we enforce it. And recently I posted on social media, I said, instead of repealing Section 230, we should limit its protections to services that only show users what they asked to see. When the algorithms remove things I asked to see and adds things I never asked to see, then they are no longer neutral conduits. Basically, we already have a law in place for this. If we interpret Section 230 appropriately, what we're saying is these social media platforms are no longer platforms. They're making editorial decisions about what gets shown. That makes them, if not a publisher, certainly an editor. And basically, the spirit of it is they are now controlling what is seen, and they are editing what is seen and what is not seen. That is different. And so if they're going to do that, then they should no longer have protections under Section 230. So honestly, what I wish we would just do is give everybody the option of turning off all algorithms. And that includes ads, at least in the feeds. Like if the ads are off to the side and are very obviously ads, that's one thing. If they're being worked into my feed as sponsored content, that's different. Okay, I could talk about this for hours, but we need to keep moving. We've got a lot of things to cover. All right, next up, this is from Gizmodo, and it's a disturbing but not surprising tale about sharing information about users with the U.S. government, when the U.S. government is doing some very questionable things. Reddit, Meta, and Google voluntarily complied with some of their requests for identifying details of users critical of Immigration and Customs Enforcement, or ICE, sent as part of a recent wave of administrative subpoenas that the Department of Homeland Security has been distributing to big tech the past few months, according to an anonymously sourced New York Times report. Those three companies, plus Discord, have received quote-unquote hundreds of such requests that have come from the DHS recently. Meta, it should be noted, is the parent company of Instagram, Facebook, and WhatsApp. Administrative subpoenas used for this purpose represent an escalation. This tool, which comes not from a judge but from the DHS itself, was formerly reserved for situations like child abductions, according to the Times. The users were targeted because their posts, quote, criticized ICE or pointed to the locations of ICE agents, unquote, according to the Times. A Google spokesperson replied to the Times with a statement saying, quote, when we receive a subpoena, our review process is designed to protect user privacy while meeting our legal obligations. We inform users when their accounts have been subpoenaed, unless under legal order not to, or in an exceptional circumstance. We review every legal demand and push back against those that are overbroad, unquote. Gizmodo requested comment from Meta, Discord, and Reddit, and we will update you if we hear back. According to the Times, one or multiple of the relevant companies has stated that they notify users of their request from DHS and give them a 14-day window to fight the subpoena in court before complying. Okay. First of all, these companies just know way too much about us. So again, that makes them prime targets, not just for malicious actors who want to steal that information and maybe use it to blackmail us, but also it's a one-stop shop for our government agencies and law enforcement to gather information with very little necessary documentation. Basically, it's a subpoena they wrote for themselves. They didn't have to get any judge to approve it. And also note that despite what they're saying here, I don't believe there's any legal obligation for these companies to notify you ahead of time. Apparently, their policies are such that they will try to do it, when they can or when they're allowed to. Sometimes they can be told not to. So that doesn't really make me feel any better. But also note that even if they do notify you, fighting this would probably require you to pay for a lawyer, and you could still lose. So, look, whatever you think about ICE and what they're doing in the United States today, you may not be in a targeted group today, but as we have seen, that can change very, very quickly and in unsuspecting ways. So violating the rights of one of us should be treated as violating the rights of all of us. If it's not you today, it certainly could be you tomorrow. All right, this next one's about Meta, and it's just so cringy. It's from The Verge, and it's about them trying to sneak out facial recognition technology in their new smart glasses. Meta aims to introduce facial recognition to its smart glasses while its biggest critics are distracted, according to a report from the New York Times. In an internal document reviewed by the Times, Meta says it will launch the feature, quote, during a dynamic political environment where many civil society groups that we would expect to attack us would have their resources focused on other concerns, unquote. The document is from last May and reportedly describes the new name tag features that would allow smart glasses wearers to identify people using Meta's built-in AI assistant. The New York Times reports that Meta initially planned to launch the feature during a conference for the blind before releasing it more widely, but that never panned out. Meta, which makes smart glasses with Ray-Ban and Oakley, reportedly plans to launch the feature as soon as this year. Sources tell the Times that the facial recognition technology wouldn't allow people to identify everyone they see. Instead, Meta is reportedly considering using the feature to detect people that the wearer is connected with on one of Meta's platforms. It's also exploring, quote, identifying people whom the user may not know, but who have a public account on a Meta site like Instagram, unquote, according to the New York Times. We have already gotten a taste for what a future with facial recognition on Meta glasses may look like. In 2024, 2 Harvard students developed a project that allows Ray-Ban Meta smart glasses wearers to identify people's faces and use public databases to find names, addresses, phone numbers, and relatives. Features that identify someone by face can be helpful for people who are blind or have low vision, but connecting them to a broader social network or database could pose serious security risks. The company called Envision partnered with Solos to launch a pair of glasses that uses AI to help blind or low vision users recognize other people, but only after the wearer takes a picture of them and assigns them a name within its app. Okay, so First of all, this is really sleazy if true. If there really was a memo circulating within Meta that says, hey, this is going to be a really chaotic year, and a lot of the companies that normally breathe down our back for this kind of privacy violations or creepy stuff are going to be distracted. Now's the time to act. That's horrible. But okay, look, I do get the appeal of this technology. I'm crappy with names. I would love to have a personal AI assistant looking at what I'm looking at who could tell me what I'm seeing. Maybe I'm walking around downtown in a city I'm unfamiliar with, and it can tell me what these buildings are, maybe give me directions, or maybe I'm taking a tour of something. I could see lots of great uses for it just on that alone. But yeah, also I would love to be able to have it say, this is somebody you met last year. This is their name. This is where you met them. This is, what they do. I would love to have that pop up on a little screen on my glasses as I approach someone, because I'm probably going to forget and embarrass myself. I get it. But I also absolutely do not want to live in a world where everything I do in public is recorded from multiple angles, and I'm being identified by my face or gait or tattoos or whatever constantly. That is a dystopian privacy nightmare. So I read that last paragraph in this because, there might be interesting compromises here that might make sense. Maybe it only identifies people I know, which means that I have to upload a photo of them and put their name in, which, as long as I don't automate that process by scraping the entire web, and maybe I can only put in 100 names or something like that. Maybe that works, as opposed to some system that is automatically scanning everything it sees for faces that it can find and looking them up in some global database and labeling everybody. Now, Google already got a lot of blowback from their smart glasses, and I'll never forget this because I thought it was hilarious. They called the people that wore the Google smart glasses glass holes. That was classic. Okay, but anyway, the only real answer here is probably, again, regulation. The market cannot fix this. And it might be sufficient to outlaw just recording in public places and only allowing facial recognition for people you know. I don't know. We'll have to talk about this and figure it out. And like this article says, people that are blind or with low vision, there are obvious, straightforward, good uses for this kind of technology. But we need to do what we can to protect people's privacy as much as possible. And by the way, if you have not read the book Careless People, you should definitely do that. All right, so this next article I'm not going to bother to read. It was actually released from these researchers who have done good work. I'm not saying anything bad about the work that they've done. In fact, it's very important work that they did. But this headline really got blown out of proportion, and you may have seen some. For example, here's some of the headlines about this article. First of all, the article that they wrote, the researchers, was titled "Password Managers Less Secure Than Promised." The Hacker News said, study uncovers 25 password recovery attacks in major cloud password managers. Ars Technica said, password managers promise that they can't see your vaults isn't always true. The Register says password managers don't protect secrets if pwned. And PC World actually said these 3 popular password managers are insecure, researchers find. Okay, so that last one certainly is not really strictly true. Some of these headlines have actually, I think, been softened since they debuted as well, which is a telltale sign. Okay, so look, the bottom line is, according to these researchers, if somebody was able to completely take over the servers of your cloud-based password manager provider, they might be able to do some very clever and very complicated things to learn some things about your vaults. In some cases, they might be able to change a password. Apparently, in some cases, they might be able to figure out what a password was. But this is definitely not an all password managers are broken kind of thing. It's a zero knowledge implementations have edge cases if the server behaves maliciously. So this would require a server compromise, a malicious update channel maybe a rogue insider, which, all these things are possible, but these things are in practice very hard to pull off. And particularly now that these researchers have told these companies about these attacks, and the companies have implemented mitigations and fixes, now it becomes even harder, maybe impossible. So this is fantastic research. We need studies like this. We have to harden our systems. We need security researchers out there willing to beat up on these things and find vulnerabilities so we can fix them. That's all great. But the headlines, including from the researchers themselves, were, I think, personally misleading. However, I will say, if this attack scenario worries you, you can switch to a local-only password manager. You should still use a password manager for sure. But look at KeePassXC. That's KeePass and the letters XC. There are others like that, but that's the first one I would look at. If you want to keep your vault purely local and then find some way, perhaps yourself, to do the synchronization of your vault between devices, that would give you a lot more control over this and would avoid this particular scenario. All right, next up, this is from The Verge, and it's about if you've got a robovacuum, or really honestly, this is, again, these things apply to just about any IoT device anymore. So keep that in mind as you're reading this. This could be some other device that gets compromised. But here's another example of IoT devices with horrible security. As we like to say, the S in IoT is for security. All right, so this article starts with this researcher's name, who I'm going to probably clobber. So it's Sami Aadmissions. I'm gonna go with that. Claims he wasn't trying to hack every robot vacuum in the world. He just wanted to remote control his brand new DJI Romo vacuum with a PS5 gamepad. He tells The Verge, because it sounded like fun. But when his homegrown remote control app started talking to DJI's servers, it wasn't just one vacuum cleaner that replied. Roughly 7,000 of them all around the world began treating Aadmissions like their boss. He could remotely control them and look and listen through their live camera feeds, he tells me, saying he tested that out with a friend. He could watch them map out each room of a house, generating a complete 2D floor plan. He could use any robot's IP address to find its rough location. On Tuesday, when he showed me his level of access in a live demo, I couldn't believe my eyes. Tens, hundreds, thousands of robots reporting for duty, each phoning home MQTT data packets every 3 seconds. And I'll stop for a second. MQTT is a protocol used to talk to some IoT devices. Anyway, it was reporting their serial number, which rooms they're cleaning, what they've seen, how far they've traveled, and when they're returning to a charger, and the obstacles they encountered along the way. I watched each of these robots slowly pop into existence on a map of the world. 9 minutes after we began, Aadmissions' laptop had already cataloged 6,700 DJI devices across 24 different countries and collected over 100,000 of their messages. If you add the company's DJI Power portable power stations, which also phone home to these same servers, Aadmissions had access to over 10,000 devices. When I say I couldn't believe my eyes at first, I mean that literally. Aadmissions leads AI strategy at a vacation rental home company. When he told me he reverse engineered DJI's protocols using Claude code, I had to wonder whether AI was hallucinating these robots. So I asked my colleague, Thomas Ricker, who just finished reviewing the DJI Romo, to pass us its serial number. With nothing more than that 14-digit number, Aadmissions could not only pull up our robot, he could correctly see it was cleaning the living room floor and had 80% battery life remaining. Within minutes, I watched the robot generate and transmit an accurate floor plan of my colleague's house with the correct shape and size of each room just by typing some digits into a laptop located in a different country. Separately, Aadmissions pulled up his own DJI Romo's live video feed, completely bypassing its security pin, then walked into his living room and waved to the camera while I watched. He also says he shared a limited read-only version of his app with Gonzague, I'm not going to get that right, the CTO of some IT consulting firm in France, who then tells me the app let him remotely watch his own DJI Romo's camera feed before he even paired it. Aadmissions was able to enable all of this without hacking into DJI servers, he claims, and he says, quote, I didn't infringe any rules, I didn't bypass, I didn't crack, brute force, whatever, unquote. He says he simply extracted his own DJI Romo's private token, the key that tells DJI servers that you should have access to your own data, and those servers gave him the data of thousands of other people as well. He shows me that he can access DJI's pre-production server as well as the live servers for the US, China, and the EU. He says his tool wipes the data each time he closes it. Here's the good news. On Tuesday, Aadmissions was not able to take our DJI Romo on a joyride through his colleague's house, see through its camera, or listen through its microphone. DJI had already restricted that form of access after both Aadmissions and I told the company about the vulnerabilities. And by Wednesday morning, Aadmissions' scanner no longer had access to any robots, not even his own. It appears that DJI has plugged the gaping hole. But this incident raises serious concerns about DJI security and data practices. It will no doubt be used to help retroactively justify fears that led to the Chinese drone maker getting largely forced out of the US. If Aadmissions could find these robots without even looking for them, Will it protect them against people with the intent to do harm? If Claude Code could spit out an app that lets you see into someone's house, what keeps a DJI employee from doing so? And should a robot vacuum cleaner have a microphone? Quote, it's so weird to have a microphone on a freaking vacuum, unquote, says Asdrubal. Unfortunately, DJI is far from the only smart home company that lets people down on security. Hackers took over robovacs robot vacuums to chase pets and yell racist slurs in 2024. In 2025, South Korean government agencies reported that Dream's X50 Ultra had a flaw that would let hackers view its camera feed in real time, and that another Ecovacs and a narwhal robovac could let hackers view and steal photos from the devices. Okay, not much more to say here other than, look, this is just another example of why you do not want to trust your IoT devices any more than you absolutely have to. Again, I put all my IoT devices on my guest network. They'll realize that in this case, that would still allow this device to be hacked. It would just isolate that device on your network should the device be hacked by somebody malicious. You might then try to use that as a beachhead to hack something else in your house. So be careful out there. All right, so next I've got a string of articles about Ring, the doorbell maker, and their rather creepy Super Bowl ad. So there's a lot of things to talk about here. I'm going to kind of combine several articles into one long read here. Let me start with a couple from 404 Media to introduce this topic. At Sunday's Super Bowl, Ring advertised Search Party, a cute, horrifyingly dystopian feature nominally designed to turn all of the Ring cameras in a neighborhood into a dragnet that uses AI to look for a lost dog. And we're going to be talking a lot about the Ring founder Jamie Siminoff here. In this case, he says, quote, one post of a dog's photo in the Ring app starts outdoor cameras looking for a match. Search Party from Ring uses AI to help families find lost dogs, unquote. On screen, an AI-powered box formed around a missing dog. Milo Match, it says. And then the commercial goes on and says, quote, since launch, more than a dog a day has been reunited with their family. Be a hero in your neighborhood with Search Party. Available to everyone for free right now, unquote. It doesn't take an imagination of any sort to envision this being tweaked to work against suspected criminals, undocumented immigrants, and others deemed suspicious by people in the neighborhood. Many of these use cases are how Ring has been used by people on its dystopian Neighbors app for years. Ring rose to prominence as a piece of package theft prevention tech owned by Amazon and by forming partnerships with local police around the country, asking them to shill their doorbell cameras to people in their neighborhoods in return for a system that allowed police to request footage from individual users without a warrant. Chris Gilliard, a privacy expert and author of the upcoming book Luxury Surveillance, told 404 Media these features and its Super Bowl ad are, quote, a clumsy attempt by Ring to put a cuddly face on a rather dystopian reality. Widespread, networked surveillance by a company that has cozy relationships with law enforcement and other equally invasive surveillance companies, unquote. And I'm pretty sure that was a reference to Flock, which we'll talk about here in a minute. Unlike, say, data analytics giant Palantir or some other high-profile surveillance companies, Ring is a surveillance network that homeowners have by and large deployed themselves, powered by fear-mongering against our neighbors and unfettered consumerism. Siminoff left Ring in 2023 but returned last year. In his absence, Ring explicitly sought to take on a softer tone by branding itself as more or less a device that could be used to film viral moments on people's porches. When Siminoff returned last year, he immediately sought to re-establish many of Ring's partnerships with police and set an explicit goal of injecting more AI into Ring cameras and trying to, quote, revolutionize how we do our neighborhood safety, unquote. With Ring's recent partnership with Flock, which will further facilitate the sharing of video footage with police, and its new Search Party feature, the message is clear. Ring is still, again, and always will be in the business of leveraging its network of luxury surveillance consumers as a law enforcement tool. After years of saying it wasn't doing facial recognition and that it was focused on object recognition, it has now explicitly launched friendly versions of facial recognition and facial recognition adjacent technologies. Search Party is essentially specific dog recognition, for now, and a beta product called Familiar Faces specifically identifies people you know when they're at your door. The product's website reads, quote, with Familiar Faces, easily tag your family and friends in the Ring app so that your 2K and 4K cameras can notify you when someone is spotted, unquote. Ring has always been a surveillance tool, but adding AI analysis and networking the devices together like is being promised with Search Party, turns discrete pieces of tech into massive automated surveillance dragnets. Okay, so that goes on, but I'm going to skip ahead to their next article because lots of different things kept coming out as the week went on. And this next 404 article says, Ring's controversial AI-powered Search Party feature isn't intended to always be limited only to dogs. The company's founder, Jamie Siminoff, told Ring employees in an internal email obtained by 404 Media. In October, Ring launched Search Party, an on-by-default feature that links together Ring cameras in a neighborhood and uses AI to search for specific lost dogs, essentially creating a networked automated surveillance system. The feature got some attention at the time, but faced extreme backlash after Ring and Siminoff promoted Search Party during a Super Bowl ad. 404 Media obtained an email from Siminoff sent to all Ring employees in early October, soon after the feature's launch, which said the feature was introduced first for finding dogs, but that it or features like it would be expanded to, quote, zero out crime in neighborhoods. This is by far the most innovation that we have launched in the history of Ring, and is not only the quantity, but the quality. I believe, and this is again Siminoff talking, I believe that the foundation we created with Search Party, first for finding dogs, will end up becoming one of the most important pieces of tech and innovation to truly unlock the impact of our mission. We can now see a future where we are able to zero out crime in neighborhoods. So many things to do to get there, but for the first time ever, we have the chance to fully complete what we started, unquote. Okay, so that sounds pretty dystopian and scary. And by the way, the CEO and founder of Flock Safety, the company that runs the ALPR cameras and other mass surveillance camera networks, has a very similar attitude for trying to stop crime, and also believes that basically this massive surveillance network will prevent all crime. Okay, so now we have an article from The Verge. Following intense backlash to its partnership with Flock Safety, a surveillance technology company that works with law enforcement agencies, Ring has announced it's canceling the integration. In a statement published on Ring's blog and provided to The Verge ahead of publication, the company said, quote, following a comprehensive review, we determined the planned Flock Safety integration would require significantly more time and resources than anticipated. We therefore made the joint decision to cancel the integration and continue with our current partners. The integration never launched, so no Ring customer videos were ever sent to Flock Safety, unquote. Over the last few weeks, the company has faced significant public anger over its connection to Flock, with Ring users being encouraged to smash their cameras and some announcing on social media that they were throwing away their Ring devices. Flock has reportedly allowed ICE and other federal agencies to access its network of surveillance cameras, and influencers across social media have been claiming that Ring is providing a direct link to ICE. While that claim is not accurate, as the Flock integration has never gone live, Ring has a history of partnering with police, and the new partnership quickly came under intense criticism. Okay, so there's a lot to say here, but I think those articles covered the basics. If you have a video doorbell, and by the way, I do, there are some things you should do to for the good of society to not make these things a global surveillance network. First of all, I would avoid Ring like the plague. I actually bought one of them myself long ago before Amazon bought them, and I liked it. But then I switched to one from Anchor. They're a company called Eufy, EUFY. My cameras only store video locally. That doesn't send anything to the cloud. And therefore, there's also no subscription fee, which is really nice. As far as I'm concerned, it works just as well as a Ring does, but it doesn't share my feed with anybody else. And by the way, if you have, regardless of what brand you have, you should be able to go into the app that controls your video doorbell and actually draw little polygons around the areas that it uses to detect motion or detect people, for example. And I highly recommend, again, for all of our sakes, that you go in and set those to only look at your yard, not at the street in front of your yard, not into your neighbor's yard. Control what your devices are actually attuned to monitoring. You should also look in your settings to see if you've automatically been opted into some of these global surveillance systems, and I would turn those off, like Watch Party. And if there's any settings in there, like, yes, if the police ask, you can automatically send my videos to them, I would turn that off as well. But honestly, we really just need to be buying products that don't do those things in the first place. I will say real quick that Apple is rumored to be coming out with their own doorbell this year. We'll see if that happens. Rumors are always weird with Apple. and they're very tight-lipped about their products. But that would be really cool. I think that if Apple were to do one, it would probably be pretty darn private. Oh, and one more thing I do want to say, if you're in the US, you obviously have been unable to not follow Nancy Guthrie's kidnapping. And of course, part of that was recovering somehow video from her Google Nest video doorbell camera. She was not paying her subscription, which, a lot of people have said, well, then how did they get the data? Because that should mean that nothing was ever sent to the cloud. That's not exactly true. Even if you don't pay the subscription, you can get the last 3 hours worth of events, which is like, when something gets triggered by motion or whatever, it records for, let's say, 30 seconds. And that gets set to the cloud for, up to 3 hours and then deleted. So still, how did they get that video if it was deleted after 3 hours? Well, Google has not really been very clear about this. They said they recovered it somehow from back-end servers, from remnants of things on back-end servers. All I can guess at this point is maybe what happened is when you delete a file, in most cases, it's actually the data underlying that file is still there. What you've really done, instead of actually zeroing out that data, like writing over it with something else to make sure it's actually erased, is you just say, this area now is available to be overwritten, and I've kind of forgotten that anything is here. So it's possible that with looking through their logs, they may have been able to figure out, what hard drive that data was on and used special forensic data recovery tools on hard drives to recover files that were not actually written over yet. They may have been marked for deletion, but they actually weren't gone. That's my guess, but right now we still don't know. The other thing is maybe there's backup systems. Maybe some backup system was able to get that video as part of that 3-hour window, and that backup system hadn't been wiped yet. I don't know. We don't know. But the upshot for you guys to remember is, if you ever upload anything to a cloud server, you should expect that in somehow, some way, it might be possible to recover that data later, even if they say it was explicitly deleted. All right, 2 more quick stories, and then we'll get to the tip of the week. This one's from 9to5Mac. It was covered on other places too, but it says, both WhatsApp and Telegram have been blocked in Russia as the government tries to force people to use its unencrypted WeChat clone, Max. All messages sent and received in Max can be read by the government. The government also blocked access to Facebook and Instagram and designated parent company Meta as a quote-unquote extremist organization. Russia has been making it increasingly difficult to use Telegram over the past few weeks and has now effectively blocked access altogether. The Financial Times reports that the company has now done the same to WhatsApp, along with access to Facebook and Instagram. Russia is able to do this because it routes all internet traffic within the country through government servers. Blocking access to Telegram seems a rather dumb move, as it is widely used by Russian soldiers on the front line of the Ukraine invasion, who rely on it for alerts about drone and missile attacks, as well as remaining in touch with family and friends back home. Even Putin's own supporters have reportedly been angered by the development. So that's it. That's the whole story. But here's what I want you to take away from this. This can happen in your country too. Don't think that it can't. Any centralized service can be blocked or taken down, including ones like Signal, because they operate a server somewhere that is used to coordinate and send all these messages, even if those messages are end-to-end encrypted. If there's still a server somewhere that can be blocked or taken down or even compromised, potentially, that is something that could just go away or become untrustworthy at the drop of a hat. And in some cases, companies like Signal that have a real high standard for security and privacy, if they felt they were being compromised or asked to do something that would compromise their service, they would probably just shut down their service as opposed to complying. That's what LavaBit did back in the day. And by the way, I interviewed Ladar Levinson about that, if you ever want to go back and check out that conversation. But the bottom line is we cannot take secure communications, private communications, for granted. And I really hate to say this because I am not a conspiracy theorist kind of guy, but this is possible. And so we need to be thinking about this. And therefore, we should all be prepared for this potential eventuality. So I'm actually looking to do maybe an interview around this, or at least a tip of the week on this topic. Basically, censorship resistant, decentralized tools for communication. And obviously session is an option here. I just interviewed Key Jeffries around that, but I want to do a more focused episode or a tip of the week on that. So stay tuned. All right, so next up, this is a Proton blog. So, as I read this, realize that some of this is a little self-serving for them, but it's also very interesting. And they did a survey of, I think, 3,000 people, and they got some interesting results. And I want to give some highlights here, and then this will segue nicely into our tip of the week. And this is about Europe, among other places, who have decided that they are done relying on U.S. big tech companies. And there are a lot of reasons for doing so. So let me just read a part of this long article about this. Large majorities of consumers in the UK, Germany, and France believe their countries have become dependent on U.S. tech companies, and more than 8 out of 10 are concerned about that dependence, according to a Proton survey of 3,000 people across the 3 countries. The survey builds on previous Proton research that found that 74% of publicly listed companies in Europe used U.S.-based services like Google and Microsoft for their email, and potentially other bundled services like cloud storage or messaging. Taken together, the data highlights the continent's deep economic dependence on companies and a government that many people increasingly feel does not have Europe's best interests at heart. Many respondents want to switch to local alternatives that protect their personal information, are governed by European law, and give them a greater sense of control. Our survey found, and there's 3 points here. First, 73% of Europeans believe their societies are far too dependent on U.S. tech companies. And among these, 83% said that they're concerned about this dependence. 54% of Europeans who follow the news are more likely to prefer European alternatives to U.S. digital services, suggesting that recent geopolitical tensions influence their attitudes. Well, that shouldn't be surprising. Reasons for preferring European tech alternatives vary, but stronger data privacy protections are the most important factor in all 3 countries surveyed. About 66% said security against hacking and fraud motivated them. Companies like Google, Meta, Amazon, and Microsoft store and control the data that powers people's businesses, mediates their commerce, and structures their lives. In response to U.S. tech's continued privacy and competition violations, Europeans are increasingly taking control of their digital lives and moving toward alternative European tech solutions. We've seen these attitudes reflected in the consumer's actual behavior. Proton user adoption and signups have significantly increased right across Europe. Following threats to invade Greenland, Proton has also seen an increase of nearly 80% in signups for Proton Mail and Proton Drive across the Nordic countries. In Denmark, Proton signups have increased by more than 100%. Other recent news headlines have accented the perception of U.S. tech as risky. Late last year, the chief prosecutor of the International Criminal Court, Karim Khan, lost access to his Microsoft inbox following President Trump's sanctions on the ICC. Khan moved to Proton Mail to resume his work, but international relations remain strained. This and other episodes have amplified calls to pursue European tech sovereignty and to build Eurostack. And I've made reference to that before, and that's a link if you want to follow it in the article. Our survey sought to understand how recent developments are shaping the views of everyday Europeans toward U.S. tech. Years of turbulent relations between the U.S. and Europe have led to increased interest in investing in European services. In our survey, 50% of British, 70% of Germans, and 71% of French would prefer to use apps and services based in Europe if they were of equal pricing, usability, and features to their US-based alternatives. Spurred by initiatives such as Eurostack, there's a growing movement to invest in Europe's tech industry and decrease reliance on US platforms. Adopting European tech is not only an economic decision, but a patriotic one. For example, the French government announced it will cease using Zoom and Teams by 2027. Last year, the EU issued a Declaration of European Digital Sovereignty, aiming to strengthen Europe's ability to be able to regulate its digital infrastructure, data, and technologies. Tech sovereignty has become more attractive to Europeans and their governments because it represents both autonomy and a chance to build a new European tech stronghold. So this article is much longer and has lots of graphs and other data that you might want to check out. But my take on this is great. I hope this results in more privacy-preserving, maybe even more open-source competitors to U.S. big tech companies. Competition is good, particularly when it's based on privacy, security, and data sovereignty. So I personally applaud this effort, and I hope it is successful. Competition also gives rise to things like standards and interoperability and data portability. These are all good things. Choice is good. And if the new choices that are being made available are more private, then maybe that will serve as a wake-up call to U.S. big tech companies and incentivize them to change their ways. So rock on. I think this is great, and I'm glad to hear it. And again, I hope that they pursue these things, and I hope they are successful. Okay, so that leads to my tip of the week. And I'm going to keep this pretty short. There's not much to say, honestly. But I did a whole series on how to de-Google your life or reducing your Google footprint. Last year or year before, it's probably been 2 years now. And it's like 5 articles. And I kind of tried to go through like the big ones, like the big Google apps and services like Gmail and Google Calendar and Google Maps and Google Docs and all these things, and tried to give actually truly usable privacy preserving alternatives to those Google apps. And I struggled. I'll admit there are some things that were just really hard to replace. And back when I originally wrote that, 2 of those things were Google Sheets, their spreadsheet app, and Google Forms, their survey service and processing app. But I'm happy to say that in recent times, both of those have been addressed. One of them by Proton. Proton has finally come out with not only a Google Docs replacement, but a Google Sheets replacement. And it's still in its infancy. The Google Docs is pretty darn good. I think it'll be good enough for most people. Sheets is still a little bit rudimentary, I think, but it's going to get better. They're going to keep adding features to it. And Proton's doing a really good job of coming up with a whole Office suite to compete with Google, among other things. So that's great. But the Forms thing, I do surveys as you know, on a periodic basis. I do the listener survey, but I do other surveys as well. I also have forms that I have my guests fill out and things like that. And there really just wasn't a good, workable, usable, free or free-ish forms service. If you want to do a form service, most of them were geared toward companies, big companies. And so they charged a lot of money, and I just couldn't afford that. And then the ones that had freemium models, the free versions were just almost unusable. Like you get 5 forms, and they can have at most 5 questions each, really dumb limitations like that. You could try it out, but you couldn't really they weren't really usable. And I've tried some. I've tried JotForm, I've tried OnlyOffice and Nextcloud, and I've tried various ones. And for various reasons, they just fell through. And recently I've polled some of my privacy friends, and they gave me some great ideas. I also did a little searching on my own and found some other ones that were good too. So I want to give you a couple options there too, if this is something that you're interested in. First of all, there's a company called Tally, and they have a really powerful forms and surveys service, and the free version has all the features you could ever want. Very, very few limitations. And the company is way more private than Google. Now, it is still a private company, and it's not end-to-end encrypted, for example. But, if you're doing forms and things that is not dealing with personal information, it is a great alternative, like a straight-up competitor for Google Forms. But however, I also found some more private ones that have either gotten better or are new. CryptPad has gotten a lot better. It is end-to-end encrypted. You can check them out. And then there's another one called Palform, Palform, that I thought looked pretty good as well. Both of those are very privacy focused. I believe they're both end-to-end encrypted, and they're actually usable. Like the free tiers are actually usable. So if that is something you do and you're looking for an alternative to Google Forms, check those out. And also check out my whole article on this. I need to go back and update a few things in the previous articles I wrote, but I do have the new article about Sheets and Forms with links to all of these things I just talked about. So if that's something that you need or you might be interested in, check out my blog at firewallsdon'tstopdragons.com. So there you go. There's your news and your tip of the week. All right, that's going to do it for this week. I should have mentioned one more thing for the tip of the week, but in the blog article, certainly the last one I just wrote, I'll probably have to fix it in the other ones. If you do want to check out Proton, there is a referral link in there. It's my referral link. Now, I don't need the money. I'm not doing this like affiliate stuff where I need the money. This is really honestly for you because we both would benefit. I think if you sign up for a paid plan, we'll both get $20 off. So yeah, it'd be nice for me, but it's also nice for you. If you know somebody else on Proton, have them give you their referral link. It's just a way, there's no reason not to do it. You may as well get $20. Why not? But if you can't find someone else to get a referral link, you can use mine. It's in the article. All right. So patrons, on Thursday, my top patrons will get their Merlin's musings for the week. And I'm going to walk through a QR code scam. This goes back to some of the Hacklore stuff. Again, QR codes themselves are not risky, but they do obfuscate where you're going to go. And this is an example of where that is happening. So I was getting inundated by a bunch of scam emails, and so I'm going to kind of walk through how I dissected that. And my top patrons will get that on Thursday, as usual. Now, next week, we'll be airing a very interesting interview with Nick Merrill. He's the CEO and founder of a privacy-focused cellular provider here in the United States called Freely, and he's doing some really interesting stuff. And we kind of talk about how private cellular networks just can be, like, because they kind of need to know where you are. That's how they function. So that is very interesting. Well, that will be next week. And then the interview after that will be a kind of a small panel discussion with a representative from Consumer Reports and another one from More Perfect Union on a study they did about surveillance pricing that is really interesting. And I've got lots more stuff in the pipeline. Great stuff, including Carissa Veliz and Cindy Cohen, and much, much more. So if you haven't already, subscribe, and then you won't miss that. Okay, that's going to do it for this week. Take care, everybody. Stay safe out there. And until next time, as always, don't get caught with your drawbridge down.